Achtung Baby, welcome to the big album show. I'm Dan.
And I'm Paul.
Tonight, we're discussing the seventh studio album from none other than U2. Released in 1991, Achtung Baby was produced by Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno and recorded at Berlin's Hansa Studios shortly after the Berlin Wall came down. When we discussed the guest for tonight's show, we thought about inviting Bono on, but we decided to get someone even better than the real thing.
Oh, instead, very good, Dan. Very good.
we decided to invite Professor Luke O'Neill on. Professor Luke O'Neill is a professor of biochemistry in the School of Biochemistry and Immunology in Trinity College. He is a well-known figure in the media, particularly at the moment, and he is also the lead singer of the Metabolics. So it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show, Luke.
Oh, thanks for asking, Dan. Delighted to take part. And thanks as well to Paul. Looking forward to our chat about one of my favorite albums. So that's good, you know.
So the first question is that we have for you is, you said in an interview that we read in the newspaper that you'd be in bits if it wasn't for music, and that's held you together during the pandemic. Now we're getting very deep, very fast, I see, with this question. But tell me this, what do you think it is about music that helps humans negotiate the trials and tribulations of life?
I think it's fundamental, Dan. It's a fundamental instinct us humans have as a species, to be honest. And if I can plug one of my books at the very start, Immunology, I wrote that about 3 years ago. There's a chapter on the science of music, interestingly, you know, and it goes back to the Stone Age. We love music, don't we? I think there's a few things happening. One is it's very emotional, and we all got very emotional during lockdown, didn't we? And we could laugh, we could cry, and music helped bring that out in us. That was one thing for me, you know, and just the sheer pleasure of it. I always find you know, it relaxes me usually, you know, my brain goes to a different place when I play music. So it's so important, isn't it, for our mental health and our well-being.
Yeah, and you sing and play guitar, do you?
I do indeed, yes, as an amateur. I hasten that as a hobby, but I've played music over the years in various bands when I was in college and stuff, you know, and I used to busk on the London Underground. I used to make some money that way, you know. And then, the Metabolics, that's a band of scientists and medics. And we used to play at conferences. We'd be asked to play at the dinner at a conference, you know, and then they'd love seeing us scientists and medics get up and play. And of course, because of COVID, we've done no gigs in 2 years, mind you, but we're hoping to get back to it again once things begin to go back to normal.
Looking forward to that, Luke. Heard you on the Miriam O'Callaghan show a number of weekends ago, and of course saw you at Billy Bragg, though you wouldn't have seen me.
Oh, yeah, there, Paul. Very good.
I was indeed. I mean, thinking about Achtung Baby, I mean, when you cast your mind back, Luke, 30 years ago to when you first heard it, what was your impression of the album then, and what's your impression of it now?
Well, I remember, Paul, Rattle and Hum had come out, and it was 88 or something like that, you know, and I was living in London at the time, actually. And me and a bunch of expat paddies went to see that movie in Leicester Square, and we didn't like it, actually, you know. And we were U2 fans, and this is a bit overblown and stuff, so we're disappointed, you see. And then we loved the Joshua Tree, which came out in 87, I think it was, you know. So that was a bit disappointing. We were waiting for their next move, basically, you know. And so when Achtung Baby came out, we all got it and played it and went, oh, this is better. You know, this sounds much, so something going on there that was a bit different from their previous stuff. And of course, as I'm sure we'll discuss ad nauseum, the anthemic one was on it, wasn't it? And that, in my opinion, that remains our best song by far. I think many people agree with that, you know. And then it just rocked out. It was just a great buzz off it, you know. I thought our playing was brilliant. So from the first time I heard it, which was pretty soon after the release, I remember getting it. And I thought, wow, there's something special about this album. There's something different about it. And it's always been a favorite ever since then, really, you know.
Something that you said off mic kind of struck me when you said that you thought the record saved them. And I mean, I think that's not just your take. I think that's the take of the band as well. And it certainly is the take of many of us who are unapologetic U2 fans. Not that there's anything to apologize for, but occasionally there are critics, rather. But if you look at the road to Achtung Baby, I think for me it begins in '89 at the New Year's Eve gig in Dublin when Bono says at the end we're going to go away and dream it all up again, and he wasn't happy with those shows, or so he said. I mean, Bono was the master of a narrative and the master of a story. So, but anyway, and of course, one of the interesting things that they did in that gig is that became a bootleg tape right throughout the Soviet Union, and of course, the band really liked that, and they liked the possibility of bootleg and the possibility of expanding their audience. So between that show and the album, you get the Clockwork Orange soundtrack, which was a stage show, not a soundtrack, rather stage music to the stage show, which they did. And again, that wasn't without its critics. But they did that. And then what they do is they go right to the heart of Europe. And I really love this about U2, the musical geography of it. Now, I'm not sure if that is a genre. Perhaps you could do a PhD in sociology at UCD, but it's when you think about it, U2, they started off in Dublin with a more British Irish sound influenced by the music scene of the time. Yeah. Then they moved right into the North American music during the 80s, and you very much firmly get that on the Joshua Tree. And then they really did it on Rattle and Hum. But here they plant they plant their flag, if you will, right at the very heart of Europe. It's Brian Eno's idea, I think, to go to Germany, and Eno, of course, had formed there with Iggy Pop and Bowie. But it's remarkable. They arrive in Berlin. This is just a classic U2, the way they have this sense of timing and history. They arrive in Berlin just on the day, I think, that Germany was formally unified. I mean, this was can you recall that time, Luke, of that period? Yeah. And what they were doing musically was really trying to reinvent themselves, wasn't it really?
That's right. You're dead right. But I mean, I think what was going on there, in my view, was they needed to go somewhere special to save themselves in a way, you know? And I think it was Edge or someone said domesticity was the enemy of rock and roll, is a famous phrase at the time. They had to get out of Dublin, right? And where do they go? They go to a Nazi ballroom. That ballroom was famous. Where Bowie made it. I knew some of this stuff actually before I looked up my notes, but it's true. So imagine making an album in this Nazi ballroom. And the atmosphere, I think Lanois was a great man for picking atmospheric places to record in, you know. And here's a striking thing that struck me now thinking about this today. There's a parallel with the Beatles here big time, right? Because and we just seen Get Back. Have you seen this Get Back? Beatles fan on the way now. I'm a bigger Beatles fan than a U2 fan. So I've seen Get Back. It's just like that. That was Twickenham. You know, the Beatles go to this miserable place. It's a vast, cavernous place. They don't get on with each other, fighting. They record a few numbers. George Harrison threatens to leave. Now in Hansa, Adam Clayton hands his bass to Bono and says, "Well, you play it." You know, not just like George Harrison in Get Back. And then they realize, oh, let's get out of here. And the Beatles go to the Apple studio, as you know, in London. The U2 go home and they go back to wherever, to Dublin, and they begin recording again. So the parallel is amazing. And remember, the Beatles were in trouble at that time as well, because like they just had the White Album and Sgt. Pepper. What do we do now? You know, they were for new ideas. They go back to rock and roll actually and playing together. That was their idea. U2's idea was, let's get more European, Paul. You're dead right. And then use kind of, you know, more dance tracks and various other effects and so on. And then I think Berlin, yeah, I mean, they obviously loved the kind of sexiness of Berlin, didn't they? And the link back to the 1930s and all that kind of thing was in their minds as well. But as I said, kind of backfired a bit, didn't it? Because they didn't like the Hands in the end, and they went back to Dublin. But if they hadn't gone there, probably they could have broken up. There was a real risk that they were going to break up if you look at what they were saying at the time. So there's no doubt that thing. And then I know we'll talk about the songs in a minute, but one came out of that struggle, remember, because that's about the band. I think it's not about a lover. Yeah. Wow. We're one, but we're not the same. You know, we get to carry each other. That was about the four guys in U2, you see. So, and that's why that song is so real and honest and vivid. I think it came out of a painful experience as a band. And it was written in Hansa. I think that's the Get Back, by the way, guys. Right. So they composed that in the Hansa together as a group. The Beatles, if you've seen Get Back, that you can see them writing Get Back in the studio together. So I think there's a real Bono would love to hear that, wouldn't he? But the part with the Beatles is really clear to me when I looked up some of the history of it. It's really interesting that those overlaps, isn't it?
Yeah. Of course, Bono has declared U2 better than the Beatles.
Well, indeed, that's right.
And you know, he didn't quite do bigger than Jesus or bigger than God, but bigger than the Beatles. Better than the Beatles is where he went. I mean, it wouldn't be correct really to say with U2 or with Achtung Baby that it's all about the music, because of course they're doing here. I mean, it's so incredibly interesting, the idea of parody, the irony, the idea of sending up yourself. I mean, it's deeply theatrical. And then you get the Zoo TV tour that comes after, which of course myself and Dan narrowly missed. My first introduction was the Pop Mart tour on Lansdowne Road a number of years later. Well, if you took the idea that it's all about the music, let's do our top tracks from the album. I think we might just mix around all of us. I'll go first with my third track, which for me is probably one. It wouldn't be my top track on the album, but I think for me, I mean, you mentioned there, Luke, just picking up on the point, it was the first track they laid down on the album. So there's great significance in it. There'd been huge tension before. You mentioned the Adam point, but there's also Larry, of course. So you've got the rhythm section almost united, I think. Well, you know, this is my words. They have a view, they have a position. Bono and the Edge have a position and have a view. And of course, the Edge is bringing in drum machines. That's the first time they're bringing all that new technology into the studio. Larry's not happy, but once one happens, the whole thing clicks into place. Of course, Daniel Lanois had a big role in that, in the sound of it and creating that sound. I'm not going to do the sound. Dan knows I don't do the sounds very effectively, but you know that sound, and it's deeply influenced by the producers as well. And it's a terrific tune. It means different things to different people, and of course, they've talked about what it means at different times. The track one, the idea of one, this is very early 90s stuff now altogether. There was an invitation from the Dalai Lama to appear at a festival in Tibet called the Oneness Festival. And Bono wrote back saying one, but not the same. And of course, the single became, the proceeds were dedicated to an AIDS charity and to the fight against AIDS, and they used that to promote that cause. But for me, I always thought it was about the reunification of Germany. It was always that in my head. I was only 10 at the time, and I was quite aware of that. I mean, in my primary school on the wall, we had this huge, big, this old map of it was the Soviet Union, all red, and we had the old school map. But I recall the reunification so clearly, and for me, it was about that. And I got that idea, I think, from the Chipmunks, who had done a song called "The Wall Comes Tumbling Down." So what an amazing thing though that they did with one, where it's about the band, and it's about that, it's about their cause, it's about Germany, and it's just also about the first line. For me, it's like childlike. Cray says, "Is it getting better?"
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. But a great song will have that. It'll have several meanings in a way, and maybe unintentionally it became 3 or 4 different things to us all. It's about a love affair breaking down. Probably it's also about the 4 guys together. Yeah. And you're quite right, Paul. It must the unification of Germany. We're one again. That kind of notion. And then we can't avoid the Christian message. We get to carry each other. That's a single line that describes. And we all know there's a Christian element to this album as well. So that's a really fascinating line to describe what Christians do for each other, isn't it, in a sense? So, and that chorus is just so simple. And what gets me about that song is the lyric is really simple, actually. You're quite right, Paul. I mean, it's the greatest songs of all have huge simplicity in them and yet great depth. And one manages to achieve that. And it's very dark. I mean, it's extremely depressing, the verses, the chorus is uplifting. But good God, the verses are really bleak, aren't they? And that takes confidence, I think. And that mix is what makes that song genius in a way for me. The mix of the light and the dark, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, Bono, of course, always highlights that it's about that lyric, get to carry each other rather than got to carry each other. And it is a brilliant lyric and sounds so good live. My other top two tracks would be, and I had some difficulty choosing the top ones, but my other 2 top ones are Zoo Station and Even Better Than the Real Thing. And I can't really describe how good for me Zoo Station sounds. And it's the first track on the album, and it just introduces to the world of the album. But for me, it sounds like a car cranking up, that beginning. Yeah. And in it goes, and the lyric is tremendous. And Zoo Station, so the heart of West Berlin, the biggest train terminal at the time. I don't think anymore, but the biggest train terminal in West Berlin at the time. And it's the idea of the zoo, and of course they followed it up with Zoo TV. But also, what's interesting about it is the personal side of it, that in U2's lives, I mean, different things are happening in the background. So Edge, was going through a marriage separation or had gone through it. But Bono, of course, had become a father for the second time in July 91. And, you can see that maybe a little bit in the title, Achtung Baby, warning baby. But, there's the lyric there, I'm ready to be alive, I'm ready to push. So, I mean, I just love, and I absolutely love the lyric, but I love the rhythm section, and particularly what Larry does with the drums there. I mean, I think this is Larry's revenge against the machine, because when you see the Zoo TV tour, and if people haven't seen it, go watch it again on YouTube. Watch that Sydney tour. I mean, a mate of mine watched it a few weeks ago and said, I could not believe how good it was. But listen to the drums and the drumming and how Larry drives the band. It's just terrific.
Is he raging? Is he raging against the machine there, Paul?
but my final sort of take on Zoo Station is that it sets the atmosphere for the record. So the lead single, The Fly, sets the tone as well. But it just sets an atmosphere that it follows through. But even better than The Real Thing is my top track on the album.
Interesting.
It has a sound. The band have likened it to the Rolling Stones, and you can see where you can see that influence, the guitar riffs. But for me, the best part of it is the lyric and the chorus, and the idea of even better than the real thing. And again, there's all sorts going on. There's all sorts going on there. But I think it was Eno. The track had been around for some time. I think going back to as far as the Rattle and Hum days. Though certainly wouldn't have sounded any appropriate on that record, but I think it was Eno had said, this is even better than the real thing, and hell's even better than the real thing. But the great thing about that track is how good it sounds live. And if people remember the 2010 Glastonbury concert that U2 did, it's just a terrific tune. But for that gig, they broke off the 360 tour. That was the one with the claw for people who may be forgetting. They broke off 360, did this Glastonbury show, which they didn't need to do, but there was a lot of pressure and controversy around it. There was a protest in the crowd by people had a little banner that said, you pay tax too, ? And had to be taken down, all of that, or was taken down rather than had to be taken down. But that night, they recreated the sound very much of that early 90s U2. They looked that way, they sounded that way, and that track just sounds so terrifically good. So it gets probably my top track on the album. Luke, we'll go to you first for your top three, and then we'll go to Dan.
Yeah, it's very difficult. They're all great. The thing is, when you have a great album, like if I dare mention the Beatles again, there's not a single weak track on Revolver, for example. It's the same with this album. Actually, they've all got their own little quirks and little uniquenesses, and again, the diversity of sound is superb. I think so. It's quite hard, isn't it? But you're right, though, Paul. Zoo TV and the opening track. Every album has to have a great opener, and it's a superb opening track. But I wouldn't have it in my top three. I'd have it in the list, all right. I think my third is even better than The Real Thing, of course. Yeah, Mysterious Ways. You see, you've got to mention that one. That'd be number two for me. And I know that these are some of the singles that came off, but they probably were the best tracks on those singles. Ways is the edge at his best. It's a very simple guitar line, isn't it? And the way it connects with the drum beat, again, that's classic U2 in a sense. And then Bono comes in with the fantastic vocal. We've got to always mention his skill as a singer is superb, And then the whole notion of Mysterious Ways. I think it's, dare I use the word, U2 are sexy for once, because it's kind of a funky little riff going on, and obviously remember I think there was a video, wasn't there, with the dancer? She ended up marrying Edge or something. Maybe that was another dancer, but
belly dancer, yeah.
But all that sinuous movement. That's not U2 from the past, is it? So for me, Mysterious Ways is kind of a clarion cry. We've changed. We're going to move on to our next phase, if you like, and we're quite happy to embrace what's real sexy rock, I suppose. And I think one of the influences I read was the likes of Manchester, and that sound came into it a bit. That kind of trip hop sound, and they're able to build that into that sound. So that'll be my second. And then one has to be the first one. I have to go back to my favorite one inevitably. I think when the history books get written, very often we wonder, what songs will remain in 100 years' time from these bands. Now all the songs are there is the problem, so you can play them all. With the Beatles, you might end up with 6 or 7 songs in the end. One will be there with U2 for definite, as possibly in their top 2 or 3, shall we say. So I've got to have that as my number one. And do you want a scientific reference now, lads? You ready for this? So when the album came out, I work on a thing called IL-1, right? Now, IL-1 is a part of the immune system. And there were several types of IL-1, They're one, but they're not the same. So that's
love it.
As true scientific nerds, we could talk about IL-1 and other IL-1s that were not the same, but so for me, one has to be the top one, really.
Excellent. I agree with you definitely that Mysterious Ways has to be in the top 3. And it's interesting that you say it's sexy. I think I agree it is. There's certainly a groove to it. The Manchester vibe is totally there. If you think of, say, an album like Screamadelica that was out 2 months prior to this, like, this song fits absolutely perfectly side by side with that whole kind of genre, that whole early 90s sound or late 80s sound. But the funny thing is about U2 is that they can be incredibly sexy and at the same time kind of squeeze in their kind of preachiness into the song, because ultimately, like when I hear Mysterious Ways, sometimes I just hear a straight kind of gospel song, except they've changed the gender of the deity, you know, to a woman.
Yeah.
But if Bono was singing "He Moves in Mysterious Ways," it would just sound like a gospel song, you know.
I think it's a biblical line, is it? Then he moves in mysterious ways, does wonders to perform, or something like that. Yeah. So there's no doubt you're right. They're drawing on that. If I say dreaded Christian thing, I'm not being a fan myself of that side of their music, but it draws on that, doesn't it? Yeah, which is very clever, and it does it in a way that's really compelling, I think, because you know, I mean, God is probably sexy, lads. Remember, so the fact that they build that in, another example of how they're being very clever there. I think as well, what you say, Dan, is very important. To make an album commercially successful, it has to be at the right time, remember. So I think the trouble U2 have nowadays is they can't make music that's contemporary anymore, really. You know, that album, Achtung Baby, was really contemporary. It was in the sounds on the radio was consistent with what was going on at that time, you know, and that probably ensured its success and sales and so on, you know. So it's a difficult balancing act. You can't be too innovative, because the fans and other people don't like it. It's got to be sort of a, you know, going along with the currency of the day, really. And Achtung Baby fits in perfectly for that early 90s sound, I guess.
Spot on. And I love your comparisons between the kind of creation of this album and the Get Back movie that everyone's watching at the moment. And that scene you mentioned where Paul is sitting down with his Hofner bass and he's strumming away on it, and then Get Back emerges within about like 2 minutes. It's incredible to watch. And when I was doing a bit of research about this album, I heard a quote from Bono when he was talking about creating the songs for this album. And he actually talked about songs as kind of things that kind of emerge in a room and he said he has great respect for songs and music, and less respect for songwriters and musicians, because songs are kind of entities in and of themselves. You know, that's this kind of weird semi-spiritual way of looking at music that he has. But sometimes, like when you look at McCartney creating music, or you hear wonderful songs from the likes of U2, there is a little bit of that in the way it touches the secular soul, at least, if there's such a thing. So I love those comparisons, and I think I'm a massive Beatles fan as well. So I wouldn't say U2 are better than the Beatles, but I think the comparisons are very, very fair, because they're obviously both incredible bands in terms of the reach and impact.
It's a great point, Dan. Something magic happens with musicians when they play together, and it's very hard to be. You can't be scientific about it. Let's start with that, because it's something really weird. I mean, they click for some reason. And you're right. When Harrison's watching McCartney banging on the bass, and you can see something happening there between them. There's eye contact, and then when they wrote one, it looks like the four of them were together there, you know, and the jamming, and lots of U2 songs, as you probably know, begin with a jam of some kind, and someone tries something, the guy responds. It's true synergy between the four, actually. I suspect what's going on there. And you get a piece of magic, which you can't you can't plan for it. You can't say, oh, let's turn up on Monday morning and write a great song together, you know. So it's very unusual, isn't it? And U2 absolutely reached that with one.
I remember someone pointed it out to me in real life one time, right? I went into Donoghue's in Dublin on a Sunday, and there was a session happening, and I brought in my bouzouki and I sat down and I was playing with them. And I'm not very good now, but so they were very nice to let me sit down and play with them. But we were playing away, and just after one of the sets of songs, the guy next to me touched me on the shoulder and he said, "Did you see that, Dan?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Did you see that moment when we were playing that music and everyone kind of knew what was coming next, what was happening?" And I said, "Yeah, I suppose you I know what you mean." And he goes, "You felt it, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I did actually." And he goes, "That's the magic of music. That's it." Yeah. And there is something very, very special about it, you know. So there's a real life experience. The other two, before we move on to the quick fire round of questions that I would pick, I love Zoo Station as well. I think it has aged really, really well. I think it just kicks off the album and announces that U2 are going to do something very, very different from what they did in the past. I think back to Paul's point earlier on about some of the other songs alluding to the whole reunification of Germany. To me, I hear this as kind of almost Bono putting himself in the headspace of someone in East Germany looking towards capitalism and going, "Okay, I'm ready to party. Show me what I've been missing, you know, and that's what I hear from it. So I love that one. I love the distorted guitar. I love the distorted vocals. I know it's very, very cliche, and Dave Fanning referenced this on his podcast about it, but there's songs on this album that you have to listen to with headphones on, and Zoo Station is one of those, because there's sounds on the track that pan from ear to ear as you're listening to it.
Yeah, right.
And it's really, really, really good. And the other one then that I like, it's a toss-up for me between, like, one is brilliant, obviously, and there's so many great songs, they're all good, but I love Even Better Than the Real Thing, and I'm going to pick End of the World just because no one else has said it, because I like the way the drums are funky. Again, it's a bit of a nod to the kind of Manchester vibe, a little bit of hip hop vibe, but the vocals are dark. The theme of the song is kind of dark and strange and preachy again. But I think it's just it just sounds great as a song.
I agree, Dan. It's terrific. In my head, when I first heard that, for some reason, I conjured up the image of Bono encountering the devil. And that's what I encountered. The devil, as he would have been known when I was growing up. You know, I haven't seen him in quite a while. I was down the road just passing time. But it is a terrific track. And again, one of the great things about that tune is how good it sounds live. Yeah,
exactly. That's a really good skill, isn't it? To turn an album. The Beatles couldn't have done that, by the way. Let's give you two a shout out.
There we go.
There's no way the Beatles could have performed, you know, with the Abbey Road second side live. That's what, you know, it's unlikely anyway, isn't it? Mind you, McCartney does it, doesn't he? So maybe they could. But you're right that the songs really translated very well into a live audience. And I guess they were written for a live audience, I bet you, in their minds. You know, they wanted to go and perform these, didn't they? Because the live performance was a key part of what they were about. Yeah. So that was consistent with that ambition.
Yeah. Dan, do you want to go to our questions for Luke now, our quick fire round?
Yeah, let's do that. This is the.
No, Dan, I hope this is a multiple choice question. I'm used to choices, you see. So.
Yeah. No, these are all designed to put severe pressure on you now, Luke. So
right,
I'm ready. I hope you're well prepared, right? Okay, so first question: what is your favorite U2 song not on this album?
Oh Jesus, that's a hard one now. Hang on a minute. That's a tough. Let me think for a second. Do you know, I'd go all the way back to Boy. I think that was and I would even say I Will Follow. Isn't that amazing? And I'll tell you why, because I was only 17 when that came out, and just to cut through all the crap. And it was such a simple riff on that guitar with edge, you know. And guitars at that time had kind of gone out of favor. A lot of electronica was happening with, you know, fake music in a way, and I just thought that was superb. But there's a strange one, I Will Follow. But I could pick 10 songs, Dan, to be honest, because each album would have a classic. But I'll go with I Will Follow.
Spot on. And what's your favorite song outside of U2?
Oh, these are very hard questions, aren't they? It's like choosing which child you like most.
Well, that's on my list as well.
I do know it's A Day in the Life of the Beatles by far. That's by far and away my favorite Beatle track and my favorite track of all time. And again, because there's 5 different things going on in that song, you know, it's very complicated. And it's a great sort of bit of surrealism and all that, and different styles. There's like 5 different songs in one there. So A Day in the Life. Yeah,
it's a brilliant song. We were talking about that song last week because we were talking about the Radiohead song Paranoid Android. And without that song, you wouldn't have had like Bohemian Rhapsody or Paranoid Android, right, etc. It's incredible. Okay, what's your favorite Christmas song?
Oh, Lord help us. My favorite Christmas song would have to be Greg Lake, I Believe in Father Christmas. You know that one? It goes, they said there'll be snow at Christmas. They said there'll be peace on it. That's the best Christmas song ever written because it tells us about, you know, I believed in a fairy story, you know, and it tells us the joy of a child. And then it said, you get the Christmas you deserve at the end. So it's a great message. And it's just a great Christmas song.
That was a wonderful rendition, Luke. This could be the start of, you know, the 2023 big album show, Christmas single, you know, when you want to lead vocals. Never say never. How long do you think you'd survive in a zombie apocalypse?
These are great questions. I haven't asked these questions before, thankfully. A zombie apocalypse. Well, as long as I have stored up on lots of milk chocolate bars, I'll survive. You know, because complete food. How about that one? You know, and then I've got lots of vaccines to stop me getting infected by the zombies.
Brilliant. A coddle, yay or nay?
Yay. Oh God, yeah. Love coddle. Yeah, that's great.
Brilliant. And I take it
Very
you don't.
warming, very, very sustaining, very, very wonderful, simple, nutritious food. So definitely, yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And you don't cook your sausages before you put them in or anything.
Oh
You
God,
just-
no. No, that's for cowards.
Absolutely. Here,
They
here.
gotta be a bit slippery, you know.
What's your favorite fact?
Oh, John, that's my favorite fact. Well, my current favorite fact is just tonight we've learned that the immune system will beat Omicron, so we don't need to worry about that variant as much. Literally 20 minutes ago, a study came in from South Africa saying that you're getting what's called a T-cell response against Omicron. So there's a recent fact for you that I would give you because it's in my mind with that. You know, there's one for you.
Oh, brilliant. Well, it sounds good anyway.
Yeah.
It sounds like good news to
oh, it's good
lay
news. Yeah,
people.
yeah, very good. Well, of course, it's always what we know at the moment. It might change, but it's another piece of good news about that particular malignant version of SARS.
Brilliant, brilliant. Do aliens exist?
Yes, I think they do, and it's only a matter of time before we may never find them because they're too far away. You know, by the time they get to us, we'd have destroyed the Earth. So sadly, we'll never see them. But the chance of life evolving elsewhere is almost certain because there's billions and billions of planets like the Earth out there, you know, same conditions. And life is just a chemical process in my scientific mind, and there must be life somewhere else. Who knows what it'll be like? Let's hope it's more intelligent than us.
Yeah, there might be a band better than the Beatles out there.
You never know. Jesus in a parallel universe. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're called the Rolling Stones now.
Go ahead on that. Lennon or McCartney?
Oh, Lennon, no doubt about it.
Why?
Well, mind you, as I got older, I've warmed to McCartney more. We're reconstructing McCartney. He was hated for so long, you know, and we're all warming to him again, aren't we? I just saw some recent stuff. Did you see there was a whole night on BBC the other evening, and it was brilliant, wasn't it? No, Lennon is the key guy because he had such honesty. I think John Lennon's key strength was pure, unvarnished honesty, you know, and his intelligence. They were the two things. Not that McCartney doesn't have those, but Lennon edges it slightly for me.
I read recently that McCartney said that all his songs are based in eroticism, and I couldn't help thinking about the frog chorus. I was like, what the hell? Where did that come from?
Who writes your script? That's very good. I like that.
And then the last question I have for you: what is your big hope for 2022?
Well, you know what it is, don't you? Obviously, we put this behind us, this horrendous pandemic, and we carry on with our lives. It's so important, and I'm hopeful, and I'm also extremely confident that science will allow us to do that, because it's been a miserable 2 years for all kinds of reasons: mental health, the economy, school kids, everybody. It's been horrendous, and so when we come out of it, it's a big celebration. Let's get you two to do a gig, actually.
Yeah.
Metabolics can play support.
Yes.
And we'll do it in Croke Park or somewhere. And get Garth Brooks playing support, maybe. Yeah. Just to celebrate. And remember, Dan, if I can finish with at the moment with a good line for you, you know, we get to carry each other through this pandemic. Remember, that's the thing, you know.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you should say that about to carry each other through the pandemic. I mean, one of the things that interests me most about the response to the pandemic is that you just can't beat it alone. You can't do it alone. And suddenly all our behaviors are interdependent. And suddenly, I mean, you see the role, and Michael D has talked about it, our president, Billy Bragg has talked about it, but you suddenly see the role of solidarity and the need to do this, not just for yourself, but for a greater good.
Well, exactly, Paul. And Billy, as you will remember, maybe at the gig, he made a great little speech. He said, there's people who can't come in because they're not vaccinated. He said, that's to protect them from getting vaccinated by the people who are in, you know, because they're getting infected. It was a great line, you know. And then he said more seriously, he said, he's into liberalism, he's into individualism, but this is for the greater good. He said, it's very simple. You take a vaccine for the greater good, you know. That really captured it as well, didn't it? So you're right. It is about everybody together. It has to be this community thing, because otherwise, you know, and obviously we've seen, and I'm very proud of Ireland, actually, because the Irish people are very decent and we have looked out for each other mainly, you know, and got us through this so far. Yeah. We'll continue on.
But you can see for example, let's cast our minds to, you know, elsewhere, for example, in Britain, and some of the role of and in fact, let's be honest about it, the role of the far right you know, and that kind of, you know, on the various spectrum. But I mean, I'll just take someone like Nigel Farage, for example, who's an extreme individualist, actually, is what he is. He's a deep admirer of the Thatcherism and that philosophy. And he has that sort of skepticism and about, well, I will do it this way and I will go here and I want to do this thing. And it's very much constantly looking perhaps and a very individualistic way of looking at society. But two takes that I have just in general about this album that I wanted to put to yourself, Dan, and Luke as well. For me, when I listen to this album, I strongly am of the view that it can alter your mood. And I think I'd like to hear both your takes from both of you. What you think about, can music, I mean, you know, maybe music can't change the world, but it can alter your mood. And for me, this album, when I listen to it, I do a lot of walking these days, it fills you with energy. You cannot help but feel just full of energy. It just has that effect on me. But the other thing I wanted to put to you about is that an album like this, amazing as it is almost impossible to conceive in 2021, just about to go into 2022. And the tour is almost impossible to conceive because now so much information at our fingertips. Zoo TV hinted at that. It was a kind of a warning shot almost at that, but now that looks old-fashioned. You know, you see that they did this interview with Pat Kenny and they talk about the amazing technology which allowed them to call up and get pizzas delivered, and he put it on the screen and how advanced that it was at the time. But they're my two takes. I'd like to hear what both of you think about that.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Paul, music can absolutely shift your mood completely. And I'll be a bit down the dumps sometimes. If I stick on a piece of music I love, bang, you're in a different place entirely, you know, and you listen to it, it's great. And an album especially, I mean, I think another thing to say about this is the sequence of the tracks on Achtung Baby was very carefully worked out, I bet you, you know, a bit like Sgt. Pepper again, I suppose, and other albums are like that, aren't they? This shuffle nonsense on Spotify, you know. Now, I know Adele stopped that, didn't she? She said, yeah, in order.
We stand.
That's a great development, because I bet you can't play this on shuffle, really. You know, I think if you play it through from start to finish, it's like going to a show, basically, and the different moods. And as you said, Paul, the opening track gets us up, doesn't it? And then we're off, you know, and they'll go down. But, you know, the famous advice for a set list in a gig is have W shapes. You start with high, you go down to it, back up for the first half, then down again, and then a big finale, you know, and that's what Achtung Baby is. If you look at the tracks, actually, you know, it goes in that direction, doesn't it? So I think you're right. And in terms of could it be made? It's very difficult to know what's going to happen in music, isn't it? We need a band like you to do what they did with Achtung Baby, really, and go away and think it all up again, or whatever what phrase the Bono had was, you know, and then make it relevant. The trick is to capture the zeitgeist always. Remember, you've got to capture what's going on now. And Achtung Baby was, and so was the whole tour, was very much what's happening. You know, now we need some geniuses, I don't know who it's going to be, to go into a studio and capture what's happening now. And it will involve the pandemic. It has to. It will involve the malign influence of social media, all the current things that are bugging us. You know, a great artist will take that and will use that as inspiration and produce a work of art to help us all. And never underestimate the importance of artists for us as a species. They say things we can't say for ourselves, you know, and you two achieved that in this album. That was Bob Dylan's great strength. He was able to say things which none of us at the time, people couldn't say it. And he could capture the singer like, you know, the answer is blowing in the wind. I mean, what a simple line that is, and it says so much. So I'm hoping that the Baby, let's go that way, Paul. Sadly, I don't think it'll be you two that will make it necessarily, but I want a young band in their 20s, you know, to get in there and make an album that'll be the equivalent of this. I would hope for that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your first question there, Paul, and up until recently, I was a skeptic in terms of how much music could change your mood, but I turned on the Late last week and I saw that Westlife had gotten back together and I was raging afterwards. So it definitely changed my mood.
Did your mood plummet, Dan? You plummeted.
Plummeted, you know, absolutely.
Only kidding, we love Westlife.
Well, if they come on the show, we'll give them a hearing. But yeah. But the other thing about, can this album be made again? No, I think I'd agree with you, Luke, that something needs to be made again that's as revolutionary, that kind of shakes music up. I think we need it. I don't know about young bands though, because the Metabolics might give it a good a good go. You never know. But I'm particularly interested in the point you made about the kind of importance of music in terms of kind of expressing society's kind of feelings. And academics often write about the effect the Black Death had on art. and music and culture of that period of history, in terms, if you look at the art, and there's very kind of, there's pictures of skeletons and all sorts of imagery in the art of that period. Do you think that this pandemic is going to have an impact on music in presently and in the future, or not?
I think, yes, you'd hope so. I mean, it's a bit difficult to predict it in a sense, because now the Black Death and the 1918 pandemic actually is the last big one that inspired jazz, they think now, because the frenzy of jazz was this release from this awful burden of death that was going on in 1918, 1919, they reckon. And the Charleston, that crazy dance, they reckon, was just a joyous thing, So maybe we'll get a type of jazz out of this. I don't know, that'd be great. Like a new musical form might emerge. It'd be wonderful if we saw that. And it happens, I think, because we all respond differently to things, don't we? Now, if I'm a scientist, I'll respond in a scientific way and try to do science about COVID. So my lab, we work on COVID in my lab, obviously. But if you're an artist, you're going to use it in a different way. And Billy Bragg, in fact, I remember Billy sang a couple of songs. I think, and what really was emotional was he's written a song on a million things that didn't happen, right? Like funerals you couldn't go to, or weddings, or all those things. And it's a very emotional song, So we may well get a bit of art and a bit of music coming. I would hope so. But again, it's hard to predict, isn't it? What we really need is the Sex Pistols again, in fact, who just came out of nowhere and bang.
I wonder, perhaps, though, are we looking in the wrong places? Because maybe we're looking at a new world with all eyes, because I'm not sure, and it is the format that I'm dedicated to, and it's certainly the format that I will stick to, is the album format and the band and the live shows. But I mean, to quote, I think it was Diane on Facebook, where she said, music has changed, everything changes and it evolves, and people consume things in different ways, and they produce things in different ways, and art evolves and it influences people in different ways. I suffered a bit of nostalgia when I was researching this record, because I was looking back at videos around when the record was launched, and there's a terrific one that MTV did in Dublin with Dave Fanning, and it's got the old HMV up on Grafton Street, and that was very much my experience. And I think maybe all of our maybe youthful experience of going to the record store. Things have moved on and changed. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not necessarily better or worse, but it's just hard to see a singular album having the kind of an effect that Achtung Baby had on music. It's just hard to conceive that for me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you're right though. See, there's one worry I had, that music is kind of as an art form, it's kind of peaked. We've been saying this for decades, mind you, haven't we? Maybe the need to get innovative in music is very difficult now, because we know all the chords really, and the different ways of doing it, and it's been reinvented several times. Like the Beatles were one, and Elvis and the Beatles, and then we had progressive, and then we had punk, and then we had we had all that. You can see now U2 were able to do it, of course. I mean, they did reinvent it themselves to some extent. So you wonder how many times can you reinvent music? And to me, as an elf fella, when I hear new stuff, it sounds derivative always to me now. I rarely come across a band. Mind you, my favorite current band is Elbow. I think they stand out as very interesting, But overall, maybe it'll be painting or dance or some other art form. I'm not sure what it'll be, but I am predicting that humans respond to a crisis in different ways, and artists will respond to this one, and will begin to produce art that will really resonate with us all. And remember, the reason why it resonates is we all want to escape from this, and we all want to express the pain we've been through or the joy we might feel next, and we do that through art. So I'm sure we're going to see a burgeoning of the arts. It's just I don't know what format it'll take is the question. I bet you it'll be the biggest ever electric picnic, for example. We may have mass gatherings again. Like almost like whatever, like Celts 2,000 years ago, whatever. Maybe that'll be a big thing. You never know, because people want to get together again.
Yeah,
something to look forward to.
Absolutely. And I suppose when you think about it, though, I mean, I know a lot of people involved in music and a lot of people in the arts. They feel maybe, do they feel a little bit? I mean, I know Damon Albarn, for example, made big complaints about how live music was treated in Britain as opposed to sporting events. I mean, do a lot of people who work in the arts and in music, do they feel maybe that they haven't necessarily been treated too well during the pandemic?
I think they've been shafted because of Spotify for years, remember. I mean, it's a disastrous development if you're a musician. That's for us as listeners, isn't it? But the fact that they can't make money is one big negative, and they feel they're being used then, because they create a great song and then they can't really make a living out of it. That's really bad, So that's one grievance they have, I think. And then, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt during the pandemic, they were the last people to be thought of. Sport came back first really clearly, and that was really sort of an example of unfairness in my view. And I was, as you may remember, guys, I was pressing for EP to go ahead because I thought, look, bring that back, because it was a good time of the year to have it, September. You know, the virus is right down. And so I think they have been mistreated. Now, the great thing about musicians, and I know a lot of them as well over the years, Paul, they're great people, remember. And they're very resilient, and they're inclined not to complain. They just get on with it and want to do a gig and get out there again and lift people's spirits. They're very selfless in that way and altruistic. You know? So they're, as a community, they're one of the best communities we've got, and not just musicians across the arts, but especially musicians, I think.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see them rise again, basically.
Absolutely. And I love what you said there about the idea of lifting people, and particularly the way live bands can do that. You know, I mean, I love the Manic Street Preachers, and the effect that they can have on an audience to lift people up. And I mean, Bono himself, I mean, the Joshua Tree, I've seen U2. I mean, I think the Innocence and Experience Tour and the Experience and Innocence Tour was terrific. I think that duo of albums is absolutely terrific. Those twins, absolutely terrific albums to listen to. But the best ever tour that I saw from U2, I missed the Achtung Baby, I was a little bit young, but I did catch Pop Mart, as I said, but I caught the Joshua Tree tour in Croke Park. And I mean, you know, there's critics of, you know, U2 haven't always got it right. You know, I mean, I mentioned the you know, there's particularly some of the 90s stuff. I mean, there's critics of Passengers, which I really like, actually, because again, when you see Passengers in, I think how it was supposed and how it was intended to be, you know, you get it and you'd understand it. But you know, when you see Bono in full flight, like during the like what he was during the Joshua Tree tour, I mean, there's no one like him in rock music.
Right.
And I think what he's trying to do is lift people up.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. And again, the word kind of that shines through is commitment, isn't it? And we love committed people. In any profession, if you see someone who really believes in what they're doing, that's infectious in a good way. So you're right. And I've seen them live several times over the years. And you always come away thinking that was a very special event. You know, that something happened there. And again, it's like the magical thing in a way. And that relationship between a band and an audience is a really special relationship, actually. Whatever's happening that works, it's one of the best experiences you can have almost. And U2 very much were very much part of that, weren't they? Over the years, they've always thought about their fans. I must say, I respect them well. They always put on a good show.
Totally.
You know?
And I remember, I mean, there's so much you could say about this, isn't there, Dan? But I mean, a lot of the big U2 tours that they do, you know, when they play in lower income countries, they do that at a loss. I mean, you know, I think there's so much that you could say. You can't cover it all in a short podcast, but there's so much more that you could say. I mean, about the tours that they do and about Zoo TV. And, you know, one of the things, Dan, and I think maybe you might have a feeling on this, is how would you sum up Achtung Baby in terms of U2 and in terms of, you know, their role in music? Where does Achtung Baby fit for you to conclude on it?
Well, it's interesting that last week on the show we did OK Computer by Radiohead, because if you look at that album in Radiohead's career, it was very much the line between kind of old Radiohead and new Radiohead, with the kind of, you know, move towards more electronic instrumentation and so on. And likewise, this is a little bit like that for U2. We already talked about how the song Zoo Station really kicks off this album by saying, yes, we're U2, but we're trying something very, very new. We're reinventing ourselves and all of those kind of things. And I think in Achtung Baby, you hear the seeds of U2 to come, as well as it being an album, a great album in its own right. Like, I mean, if you think of Even Better Than the Real Thing, you could imagine that on one of U2's later albums. And some of the more, you know, some of the more kind of industrial stuff kind of only fits on Achtung Baby or maybe pop, but you definitely get hints of future U2. Of course, there is songs on the album as well that could fit on earlier U2 albums, but this is definitely where U2 say we're progressing on to something different. And that's where I'd fit this into the narrative of U2 as a band.
Yeah. Would you agree? I mean, I agree with that, Dan. What would you agree with that, Luke?
I think the other key thing I would say is, as artists, you see, they managed to literally reinvent it as well. Now, if you're an artist, you want to keep moving forward, don't you? You can't write the same poem over and over again, can you? You know, and when the history of U2 is written, it'll be seen as a key kind of a milestone of their career, where they didn't quit, they didn't break up, they had to work really hard at it, you know, like all good artists, they kind of had to really struggle. And then out of that came this really brilliant album. So for me, it's kind of an example to other artists who might be struggling, you know. In other words, keep, you know, don't give up, get stuck in again, try and rebuild your relationships with each other in a band and so on, you know. And then, of course, remember, I would also say you need to plan it, because they brought in Eno and Lanois because they were key to it as well, remember. It wouldn't happen,
very much so.
You know. And then the idea of being in Berlin, back in Dublin, that notion was interesting as well. I think one of my other favorite little stories about the album is Eno realized it wasn't going well for them, and he kind of was unhappy with some of the tracks, wasn't he? And he stripped stuff away. He said, "Go on holidays for 2 weeks, come back." You know, that was a great idea, though. So in other words, the artists need help as well, and they need George Martin in the Beatles' case. They need Eno, didn't they, hugely for this album? So, but overall, for me, it's them at their best in a way, because they innovate, they get something new going, they bring the music in a different direction, and it's hugely successful musically and artistically.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that we see a tour to mark the 30-year anniversary, Zoo TV reimagined, and let's see what it looks like, and let's see what the alter egos look like. We saw a glimpse of that on the last tour, but wouldn't it be tremendous to see that again? So I mean, my take is, I mean, we normally give these albums a score out of 10. I'm going to go for a 10 out of 10 for this record. I couldn't fault it or take any marks away.
What are you going to go for, Luke?
Well, I can't go for 10 because it's not as good as Revolver or Sergeant. I'd give it a 9 though. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. How about that? I'll leave that little one behind for the Beatles.
Yeah. I'll back you up on that one. I think you always need to leave a little bit of space for the Sgt. Peppers of this world. So not 9 from me as well. So Achtung Baby, huh?
Achtung Baby. Well, we want to say thanks very much, Luke, for joining myself and Dan here on the Big Album Show. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Not at all, but it was an absolute pleasure. It was great fun, lads. Well done. It was superb. Thanks very much for asking. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks to everyone to listen to the pod, and please remember to like and subscribe. We really need your help and support to promote the pod, and if you could give us a little retweet at the Big Album Show on social media, and share the pod if you enjoyed listening to it, we'd really appreciate it. But thanks to everyone for all the support during 2021, and we look forward to chatting to you in 2022. You're listening to the Big Album Show with Paul and Dan. Please remember to subscribe, hit like, and remember to follow us on our social media platforms at The Big Album Show.